Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 172 of the Simpa Life Podcast. As you can probably hear, as I can definitely hear reverberating in my headphones, I have a cold, or at least I'm fighting a cold, which is a bit juxtaposed to the fact that today is, I guess, the second day. If I'm releasing these in the correct order, today is the second day of spring. You know me, folks, I love to bitch about the weather. I can still see the sun today. I'm not going to tell you what day it is because you don't know how wildly out of order I'm recording all of these episodes. But yeah, the weather is improving. Like I said, the days are getting longer, the nights are getting lighter. So yeah, enjoy it, folks. All the gardeners starting to spring around Elbert Green. And I've been teasing a few things on that. I mentioned something. See, this is why I don't mention this, because I can't remember which episode I mentioned this on. I don't think it was last week. It might have been the week before. There is an update coming, folks. Once all these events all these recordings get caught up, I will be back week to week. So we will start to be able to discuss more news stories rather than things being out of date, because there is something in an episode 2 episodes ago I really should have commented on, but by now it's not worth commenting on. So yeah, please bear with me as I get caught up in this, but it means that there's such wonderful content for you all to digest. So yeah, let's jump into introducing today's guest, who is a first timer, as we were discussing in the preamble. I can't believe that he's a first timer. He definitely should have been on this podcast before, but we're making up for it now. So yeah, let's jump into introducing today's guest, who is the co-founder of the Jersey Medicinal Cannabis Patients Alliance, the coordinator for the End Cannabis Prohibition Jersey. I have that written down backwards, so it actually says End Prohibition Cannabis Jersey, which doesn't make sense to me. And he's a tireless campaigner from the Bailiwick of Jersey. Bailiwick of Jersey, not Bailiwick. Bailiwick. They are Cy Harrison. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing all good, mate. Yourself?
I think I'm getting a head cold. I just feel bunged up and so I'm sorry if I come across unprofessional from this side, but I'm gonna power through this because yeah, I've done my research as we were discussing. There's so many stories and so many elements that I want to discuss here about Jersey. I suppose, yeah. I'm going to include a Wikipedia link below, folks, so you can get the background on the island and how that works in terms of the Crown dependency. We're not going to cover all of that with that political stuff. Go do your own research. It's good for you. But we'll jump straight into asking Cy how he first got involved in sort of the cannabis industry in Jersey. Obviously, you're born and bred, as far as I've been led to believe, on the island. So you've seen the space evolve. You've been influential in quite a lot of the sort of the modern changes. So yeah, give us a bit of background.
Well, my background probably originally starts in 1996, is when I first encountered cannabis, and have been using cannabis quite regularly since. When it comes to sort of more, as you say, the kind of industry and campaigning over here, in 2018, actually, I'm a freelance web developer kind of by trade. And 2018, I started working with Jersey Hemp doing their websites. So they were the first company over here to be granted a modern license for cultivation. And then late 2018, November 2018, our States Assembly, which is our parliament, they passed legislation for medicinal cannabis. And then that law came into force on the 1st of January 2019. And when that law was actually published, I noticed that it included a provision copied over from the English legislation regarding the prohibition of the smoking of medicinal cannabis, which immediately kind of pricked my ears up and was like, what's this? And so I got in touch with our politician who brought that medicinal cannabis proposition to kind of go, what's the score here? You know, what if someone runs, their vape runs out of batteries or something, you're going to arrest them? And so, unfortunately, it was deemed kind of too late in the process because the law had already been published and it'd have to go back to the drawing boards to change all that. So we was kind of stuck with it. So off the kind of back of those conversations, I started emailing him and a couple of other states members, our politicians, pretty much almost on a daily basis throughout 2019 with kind of the latest bits of news and things that were relevant to try and move towards, not only dealing with the smoking of medicinal cannabis thing, which in itself is ridiculous because there's nothing against smoking non-medicinal cannabis, so it's discriminatory in its, various forms. But yeah, so after, kind of during 2019 was sort of emailing these politicians quite a bit, but it wasn't getting anywhere. I was just pissing them off. They weren't replying. They weren't even reading my emails by the end. So I kind of knew that we needed, needed momentum, needed a group kind of response. So I kind of, left it by the wayside a bit. And then COVID happened, beginning of 2020. And the police were running what they called Operation Shark. And they were going after what they call drug dealers and things. And they ended up raiding a couple of people in the COVID lockdown times who had grows, but they didn't actually have grows. They had the equipment and a bit of leftover material. So they weren't active dealers or anything or actively growing. And there was a big kind of sort of outpouring of, frustration at, the way the police had handled these cases. The kind of comments on our local media and everything. So someone set up the End Cannabis Prohibition Jersey Facebook group, and it being lockdown times and everyone being stuck on their computers, we had 2,500 members within a week and about 4,500 within a month. Which is just kind of incredible numbers. And it was a bit of a free-for-all back then, everyone was posting memes and stuff, but I kind of was, because I've been doing some research over the previous year and kind of compiled a lot of information of what the score was in Jersey, was kind of, I quickly became quite dominant in the group and sort of making posts and things. And then the team that we had kind of elected me coordinator, which is the role I've kind of had ever since. Kind of been focused on that. And then basically a week after the group was formed, we got news of the possibility of medicinal cannabis being available in Jersey. So there's the one sort of silver lining of the pandemic really is the UK allowed postal prescriptions and video consultations. So there had been a couple of people who've been going over to London cannabis clinics to get prescription late 2019, early 2020. But with the pandemic, people were suddenly able to do the video consultations and get it through the post. So one of the guys, James Bedding, he's a quadriplegic over here, did a video of him getting his first prescription. Within, we were able to share that immediately within the group, and who'd already sort of got a couple of thousand people, in a captive audience, because we're an island, the black market had been severely impacted by the pandemic. There was nothing coming in anymore because there's travel restrictions and all that. So there was a captive audience really there, ready for medicinal cannabis to come. So we were able to kind of document the process. I got in touch with all 5 of the clinics who were operating in the UK at the time, the pharmacies, to ensure that they could handle prescriptions to Jersey, because they needed an export license to ship it to Jersey, and the patient in Jersey needed an import license to accept it and everything. So it's quite a rigmarole. But we were able to kind of document the process, and then we set up the Jersey Medicinal Cannabis Patient Alliance to separate out those kind of patient questions of, what strain, can I take it on holiday, all those kind of things. So that's kind of been its separate entity ever since. And we kept End Cannabis Prohibition Jersey more about actually changing the law. So then it kind of carried on that way. 2020, 2021, the government we had at the time, if a law had come up to that government or to that assembly, we wouldn't have got a majority. We wouldn't have succeeded. We would have just pushed things on the back burner for a couple of years. We knew we had to wait until the next government. So we had elections in 2022. And we put together a presentation of 35 recommendations covering cultivation, medicinal cannabis, substance use strategy, decriminalisation and kind of regulation. Put that together, managed to meet up with about a third of the candidates running in that election, and did manage to really sort of start shifting that Overton window a bit to kind of at least start being a bit more open-minded about it. And then, we have had a few successes within this current term of government. And then we've got elections coming up in June. So we're going to be doing that process again, but a lot simpler in basically asking the candidates whether or not they support reform, cannabis reform, as a way forward. So fingers crossed, things will continue to progress over the next 4-year term.
Interesting. There's so many questions I want to ask, but I've made these into a nice ordered question and interview sort of style sheet here. But I'm interested there. Firstly, good clarification for do you support reform of cannabis laws? What's the political makeup of the Channel Islands? I've never had a reason to previously sort of look at it. I've done some due diligence this morning, but I didn't actually look at political party makeup or anything. Are the dominant parties? Do you have like a 2-party sort of, how is it?
No, we don't really have parties. So we have 49 elected states members in Jersey. Guernsey, I think, has 38. but neither island has parties as such. Jersey does have one party, which is called Reform Jersey, but they're not anything to do with the UK's Reform Party. They're actually a left-wing Social Democrat party, and they've got 10 members currently out of the 49, but the other 39 members are all independents. So there aren't any kind of manifestos you can really go off when it comes to the elections. It essentially comes down to do they sound nice? Are they kind of saying the right thing? Because as at the same token, when they get in government, they're not going to be constrained to their own personal manifestos or things. So it's a bit unclean, and I think because of that, we have one of the lowest turnouts in the OECD of about election turnouts are about 40%, which is horrendously low. And young people below the age of 40 just really don't vote over here, which is a massive shame. So that's something we're going to try and work on to hopefully swing the balance towards more progressive thought.
But I think with cannabis is very much a generational divide, it would seem. It's how long did you spend in this stew of propaganda? How much through osmosis have you picked up this idea, this ideology that, well, no, it's a drug bad, all drug bad. I white savior, need to come in, white knight, I need to come in and save you. Versus then direct world experience, or like how online you are versus how sort of nationalistic, I suppose. It's quite interesting that because of the low population, I mean, what is it? 45 square miles? Is that the size of it? Yeah, it's...
By 5.
Yeah, it's not very big. It's like 103,000 as we kind of discussed population, but is it a youthful or a more older sort of demographic? Because I know I'm trying not to say anything too contentious that then comes across as sort of English supremacism. But over here, obviously, you guys are known as tax havens. And so one would then associate or assume that there would be more elder people there than there are young people sort of on the island. So does that affect the political makeup as well? The fact that if there isn't a larger number of the under 40s, firstly, they don't have anything to vote for. But then if you gave them something to vote for, is there enough of them that the opposition, the people going, bloody young people, wouldn't come out and just block it?
Well, I think part of it's, that Jersey's always been, and Guernsey have always been very kind of conservative places, had a strong Methodist tradition, both islands, who are quite, teetotalers and all that. Some of that's still pervasive. As regard to kind of demographics of the population, we have got an aging demographic now. Part of the problem is, we're limited in, job opportunities and life opportunities in the island. So if you don't want a job in finance, which is the dominant industry in both islands, then, people go off to university and don't come back. So we do have that kind of brain drain and youth drain, unfortunately, in the islands, which they do kind of then leads to sort of immigration to kind of counteract that, to the point where I think over here only 50% of the island of people who live here are actually born here now. So that kind of demographic has changed. But I think even for people moving to the island, it's such an arcane kind of system to try and understand that they're reluctant to get involved and vote as well, especially if they're only going to be here for a few years, kind of setting up permanently. So it is a difficult one. Government have been trying to sort of go out into schools and sort of get young people engaged in politics, but, because we can vote from the age of 16 over here. But there hasn't really been much engagement, of that 20 to 40 gap, age group that kind of really needs the encouragement to get out there and vote. So we'll have to see in June, really.
Interesting, because I'm often reminded of Theresa May, from many bloody horrible things, but the thing I'm thinking of right there wasn't her running through the field of wheat. Field of wheat was her saying that there is no magic money tree. Bitch, cannabis. Like, what are we talking here? Like, there's what again? I very quickly glanced at exports, imports, and kind of the overall economics of Jersey, but it would seem that there's not that much sort of mass agriculture goes on. Obviously, if it's only 45 square miles, property is a big way to invest. I'm going to air quote that because I'm going to use that word lightly, money into, etc. What's there looking like? Because obviously you've got domestic production for prescription cannabis, or cannabis on prescription or medicinal, however you want to describe it. Is there scope for, a sexy new industry like domestic cultivation for adult cannabis. Like, because if I was a young person growing up in Jersey and I'm looking around the world on Instagram, and seeing all this stuff and just all around all these old farts that don't get it, of course you're going to want to get away. But if they suddenly go, we're going to invest into your future because it'll better the entire island's economics, I can see that draw to want to stay there and people that want to come back,
Yeah, for sure. We're lucky in that about half the island is still green fields. So we're not kind of completely, built up or anything. And we do have existing agricultural industries. Our main ones are the Jersey cow, obviously on the dairy side, and the Jersey Royal potato as well as our main agricultural.
Bloody horse, yeah. I love Jersey Royal potatoes.
But what they've ended up, they're not as good as they used to be. Back in the day, they would use seaweed to fertilize the fields. They stopped doing that and use fertilizers instead. And now you're getting fertilizer runoff going into the bays, and you're getting a load of green seaweeds that are now, feeding off some of the excess nitrates and things. So there's a lot of soil remediation that could be done, and which, of course, hemp would be perfect.
Rewild,
do that, even if it's only on crop rotation. And we've got issues with forever chemicals in our soil by our airport. The PFAS, which again hemp could be used to clean up our soils in that way as well, and let alone the potential business. We've got huge construction. We've got a lot of construction going on, to use hempcrete instead of concrete where possible, things like that would be hugely beneficial. And because we do have, a defined, we're an island, we've got defined borders and things, it could all be self-contained quite easily and be used for, case studies of, not only our prescribing, but other aspects of cannabis use, and whether that be, for the female flower or, the male plant. There's huge potential, which could become a draw for not only islanders to come back, but for other researchers to hook up with UK universities or whatever. So, there's always huge potential with cannabis. It's just unlocking it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you're right of the laboratory conditions effectively that are created by being a petri dish on an island. Yeah. Is amazing potential for extrapolation of data. You've got basically 100,000 people as well. It's easy numbers. You can break these up. You can measure them over longitudinal studies. You can do short-term related studies of really weird things, and then use like freakonomic kind of approach to understand wider impact. Why do you think there's a hesitancy? Is it kind of just the classic conservatism that arises from age, kind of a stubbornness almost, that I think is anthropomorphic in a way, not anthropomorphic, anthropological, like it's built into us as a mechanism that the old want to stay and the youth want to go. That's what helps keep the tribe. They keep the best shit, they keep us going to get new shit. Why do you think this the opposition? I mean, obviously you've said the demographics are the way they are. Is it partly the politics? Like, of those 49, are they, I was going to say old fogies, I don't want to say that now, I'm approaching 40, but are they on the older side?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we look back to that government that was in power between 2018 and 2022, when we had the medicinal cannabis legislation changed, they changed the law, but no guidelines or anything was brought in. The primary care body, which oversees our GPs over here, they just said, no, we're not going to provide it. So basically, there was, government didn't have to do anything because the doctors weren't going to do it. But then COVID happened, and there's this stuff coming in from the UK, and then, oh crap, and it's only now that they're actually talking about trying to regulate medicinal cannabis, which they feel should be the priority over any other, decriminalisation or legalisation aspects. But I think it's partly the politicians and the makeup, but it's also the civil service as well, who's the constant between all these governments. You get a new government in, new politicians every 4 years. The civil service remains the same underneath in all that time. So the key players there, hidden civil servants in high up positions can hold strong opinions, which then prevent things from developing the way they should. But also, I think part of it is also just the lack of a coherent approach. they're looking at medicinal on one side. You've got hemp and cultivation, on another side. It's split between the health department, the economic development department, the environment department, the infrastructure department. There's no general oversight, and no one's stepping back and thinking, well, how can we do cannabis in the round rather than just picking at it each bit every time? And that would be great to see, is actually a coordinated approach.
Yeah, you don't see that, because even in like the states where they've gone, oh, we'll have a cannabis bureau in California or whatever, they still put fucking hemp over here. It's no one's stepping back and going, what is this? Oh, it's a plant. Let's regulate this plant, not its usage, not its interpretation under an archaic text, not what this scientist claims it to be, or this guy, or what is the plant? What is the potential of it? And treat it as the object. Yeah. Because otherwise, and I feel like it's deliberate, because then they go, oh, we have to, this is in the UK, we had for years leading up to the law change, oh, we have to sort medical first and then we can talk about other shit. Law passed in 2018, and they're like, you got it, haven't you? Here, it's here. They're like, well, if you need it, it's medical. If you don't need it, then you're a bad person. Look at Labour right now. It's really giving away where we are. We're prior to the election in Manchester, folks. Labour's attacks on the Green Party, like talking about smoking crack in kids' play parks, and you're like, have you been to a kids' play park in the UK? They're already smoking crack. Prohibition creates the problems. It's not the substances, and I feel that there's no amount of data evidence that we can provide these individuals. I think they are so indoctrinated into this belief. They are so committed to it, and it's fundamental to their character that we kind of just have to age them out. But then the horrible thing is they hit a point of going, they need help. And do you know what would really help? Their aging bodies, their ailing minds. Cannabis. And they don't. They end up on opioids and things like this that then shut the body down. In terms of empathy and stuff like that, you taking opioids for a long period of time, however, to your sense of self, your sense of belonging in community and everything else, that sense of detachment compared to the sense of connection that cannabis gives you, I can see it. I mean, I went to visit, I'm building a data set at the minute for a legal challenge against my council, and I'm visiting a lot of homes of very well-to-do residents in the city. I popped in the other day, and there's a guy fixing like a 1970s sewing machine, very bespoke industry sort of thing. It was really quite a quaint sort of moment to walk into. And they were both talking about effectively medicinally using alcohol, going, the vino gets me through. And he's like, oh, it's that Jack. It's the Jack. I'm a Jack, man. And I'm walking in stinking of weed. Obviously, they all know who I am and all the thing. They don't care for it, but they were just continuing that kind of conversation. I was just wanted to be just like a little bit of this, but they can't. They don't see it. Yet they can also accept that alcohol is a carcinogen, that it's a neurological and physiological toxin and poison. It has no accepted medicinal value. It would be Schedule 1 Class A if it was like a narcotic. Yet they can do what they want, and if somebody drinks too much of it, gets in a car and crashes, it's their personal responsibility. Why then don't we have that for cannabis? And actually, I've just brought up a car, so here's a good way to bring in the next part of the conversation, which is something you're fighting at the minute and is blowing my goddamn mind. So is my interpretation of the media articles I read this morning correct? There is no medical defence, not just for cannabis, but for other prescribed drugs in Jersey?
Well, at the moment, we don't have roadside drug testing at all. Our current law just specifies that it's illegal to drive if you are unfit to drive through drink or drugs. So if you're impaired. So there's a draft law that's been brought, which is due for debate this time next month. End of March. Sorry, I've given that away again. But yeah, that draft law does not include a medical defence and only specifies limits for cannabis. What they've done is they've introduced or suggested two limits, one of 2 micrograms per litre for drivers of heavy goods, medium goods, public service vehicles, driving instructors, and if you also have alcohol in your system, and then a 5 microgram per litre limit for everyone else. Which is on the relatively high side. When you look around the world at different kind of limits, it generally goes between 0 and 5, apart from I think Norway that goes up to 9. So in that regard, it's not too bad, but it's the lack of the medical defence that's really concerning the patient community, because fundamentally no one knows what they would test for without being tested. And we all know how it can persist in the system and, tolerance and all the rest of it. So we do want a medical defence to be included. So we're the process of kind of the political process is that when a draft law is brought, it goes to scrutiny. So we're encouraging scrutiny to scrutinise it and recommend bringing in a medical defence, and also hopefully to require additional evidence beyond the blood test to define impairment. So it's not just, oh, you're over the limit, you're impaired, when we all know that you could have not had a smoke or anything for a couple of days and still be testing over the limit. So it's just trying to actually take a kind of pragmatic approach, but it's a little concerning because it's the very last sitting of our Parliament before the elections, so there's everything's being rushed through to get it in before the deadline. So yeah, we're trying to make sure that this there is a pause and we do think about it and it's not rushed through, because if it's rushed through without the medical defence, then the police could be doing roadside checks and could be pulling over and having to blood test hundreds of people in each time, which will cost a fortune in blood tests and won't make the roads any safer. It's got to be proportionate.
Do you guys have a version of the Equality Act, an enactment?
Yes, yeah, we've got a discrimination law 2013.
Does that have an element within sort of treatment of disability? Because I'm just wondering, because if they then pass it and a case goes and a case is challenged, a judge that isn't biased is going to understand that there's a real big problem with the law there. It's going to have to get sort of retrospectively looked at, but how many lives get ruined in the interim?
I mean, yeah, there is. I think there is an angle that it's discrimination, either direct or indirect discrimination, depending on which way you look at it. Which also kind of impacts upon human rights as well. But it's not just in relation to cannabis that the medical defence is required. It's, they're only listing THC at the moment as the drugs that have defined limits. But when they do start adding in the benzodiazepines and the opiates, that's when you'll really start needing in a medical defence. But there's been no progress. If they then kind of, it basically looks as though they're just targeting cannabis. When you think about it in the round, and when they do bring in the benzodiazepines and things, then they'll bring in a medical defence, which will then retrospectively apply to cannabis, and then kind of makes a mockery of this rushed nature of this legislation. So,
is there synergy to be found amongst other patient advocacy groups on the island? Because then if that is going to become a potential issue for people who are taking, these more traditional pharmaceutical preparations regularly, that have become not dependent on them in the sense of chemically, but as in they're a crutch that helps walking. Do you know what I mean? They function, they work. So then to suddenly go, well, actually now if you're going to keep that, you can't drive, and making them make that decision, I think, there could be other synergy of people to draw more attention. I mean, it seems, I'm looking at a quote here from July 2026 from Jersey's Chief of Police, and I wanted to ask you about what their kind of position is. And he's saying, he told the Child Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel that he was more concerned about drug driving than drink driving. Chief of Police Robin Smith, Smith's a cure, isn't it? Said, my answer may surprise you in that I am more concerned about that, as in being drug driving, than I am about alcohol, because it's harder to detect.
Yeah.
And yes and no, but it's detection isn't impairment, as we mentioned before. And it seems to be, again, like there's a cognitive dissonance. There's something they can't get their heads around. And I don't know if, the Jersey police, I had a mate of mine, his mum, I don't actually know what the hotel was called. She ran the hotel as a manager for a couple of years on Jersey. And he, as a teenager, went down there for like a summer and a bit. And he got in trouble once over a bit of soap bar, and his man basically went, get off the fucking island. If you're going to do that, get, literally for his own sort of shit, go back to your dad's. You know what I mean? So the police, in far as my estimation, have always been a bit shit hot. Obviously, the way they're targeting and setting up this law, like you said, is literally going, it's that one thing, it's the weed people. Yeah, as we discussed, the 2024 percentage of the population prescribed cannabis in Jersey is 4.8%.
Yeah.
So they're going after a huge part of the population, relatively speaking, you know?
But that's where this all comes from, is because we have roughly 5%, 5,000 adults using medicinal cannabis in the island. That's raised alarm bells within both government, our politicians, and the police about, wait a minute, what about all these people driving around, stoned? No, they're not stoned. They're driving there, under prescription guidance. But it's that fear of the unknown. They don't understand. They kind of see it like alcohol, and that there's a linear correlation between impairment and blood concentration. Well, no, that's not the case with cannabis. It doesn't work that way. So there's a lack of understanding of the science. When we look at, we've tried to ask, has there been any increases in, do freedom of information requests to try and find out whether there's been any increases in, drug driving or accidents or anything. No, there aren't any. It's just that number, that headline figure that keeps jumping up as, oh no, there's 5%. It's inherently seen as that's wrong, rather than understanding that the situation as to why people are using it. And it's some of the statements that have been put out by our politicians. They just don't even recognise medicinal cannabis. They just see it as cannabis, and that people are milking the system to get it. But if that was the case, then I'd have a prescription. But I don't qualify under the standard guidelines, so I'd have to take the piss at the system to get prescription. So, yeah, it's not that easy.
But again, this is where Jersey plays a vital part in potentially, if that conversation can happen in a vacuum of intelligence, of awareness, people will go, well, wait a minute, if this guy's got the magic piece of paper and he can drive and this one doesn't, surely we need to not just protect these if they're peers, that's racketeering. How do we deal with this? And like I said, it's not about detection. The level is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. It's fitness. So in a way, you've got it right currently, but there needs to be maybe an additional kind of element to that of, I mean, as we've just proven in the case that we discussed, will be a few episodes now, in the UK, because of the law changing in 2015 and then basically adding this detection is impairment, they stopped training their officers for field impairment.
Yeah.
And they would literally be allowed to go, well, smell. I smell alcohol. I smell this. And that is the precursory thing. And then if they find it after the fact, they're never going to get questioned on the initial thing. But again, it's that fitness, because alcohol is different to a lot of other drugs, or polydrug use. It could fall the same as alcohol. Like, say, if you drank alcohol and taken an amphetamine or cocaine and you were cocaethanol or something. Those kind of drugs, when you want them to a certain degree, they're going to whisper to you that you're fine. They're going to kind of go, you can get away with this. But if you take most drugs individually, like you take some MDMA and you're like, you're not going to want to get in your car and go drive. You're not even going to think about that. You're like, I don't have a prison cell getting called. I don't know. No. So a lot of drugs are not inherently going to reduce your inhibitions to a way in which you're going to be like, I'm fine. Like, bless, I don't want to give too much, like raised by a vicar and a university professor, church-going kid. And the one issue that he had in his late teens was drink driving. Every time he drank, he just got in the car. And he was mortified when he got caught and like that. And he just couldn't get his head around to the point where he was like, well, take away the keys then. And obviously then he stopped doing it until one time he walked back to his house to go get his keys to get in the car again. Do you know what I mean? If there's something, but I'm not saying there's anything wrong with not making a moral judgment against him. But in that instance, he had that problem. That's related to some other things. You can't blame it purely on alcohol, driving, or the law, or that falls in the remit of health. Would in a decent cognitive state, an average cognitive state, the average person commit X, Y, Z? That is basically the assumption of the law. And again, then with the cannabis thing, if someone feels impaired with cannabis, you're too high, you're not going to get off the couch, let alone actually go and get in the car. If you feel too high, even if you're prescribed, nobody wants to crash, and your brain isn't whispering at you going, you'll be fine, man. Your eyes aren't lying to you and trying to compensate. You haven't got that dysregulation in your body, but your brain is saying you're fine. You're actually got an awareness of, no, I am probably a bit too high. I'm going to go have a sugary drink. I'm going to go sit down for 5 minutes. I'm going to get a bit of fresh air or whatever, splash a bit of water on my face. Even by just realizing you're too high, you start to bring your own awareness back. And then the whole conversation of tolerance. Frankly, I would be more dangerous to get in a car without smoking than if I was, you know what I mean? And I can prove this. The one accident I've had since I've gone back to driving was the morning I went, I'll have a smoke and a coffee on the other side. Got out of bed, got into the car, got straight out. Didn't get 200 goddamn yards from my own house and went in the back of an Audi because I was jittery and moved, and I just went to grab some off the seat and just misjudged the thing. Whereas if I was properly medicated, had gone through my morning procedures, I'd have got in that car and I'd have been sweet. And again, not wanting to drive too fast or too reckless or anything like that because of fear of consequence. Cannabis will whisper to you going, yeah, there's cops there. Not in an over-paranoid way, but you'll be like, well, I don't want to get in trouble. So I'm sorry, I'd rather have a bunch of I'd not get in trouble drivers on the road than I'm fucking fine, mate, we're all good. So that cop's opinion on that, and again, I can imagine him being probably bit beer belly, loves being down the pub having the pints with the lads, and and he can't see it. Cannabis is an evil drug. He can't begin to think that should be on par with alcohol, socially acceptable to be bought in shops, and people give it to each other as gifts, and people come round and consume it together. Like they can't compute that. It's yeah.
But the lack of a field sobriety test, I think, is or the training of the field sobriety test, I think, is a big problem in that they just don't know how to deal with it anymore. Not in the way that they used to, which is effective. It's still not ideal, but it's better than just relying on blood tests. But I think it fundamentally just comes down to risk. The risk posed by a drink driver is 4 to 6 times your normal risk of having an accident. I think under cannabis impaired, it's 1.5 to 2 times, which I saw in some Australian literature. They equated it to the same as a driver who's over the age of 75 or a driver who's had only 6 hours of sleep. So, when we start looking at, the risk element of, an accident, then let's look at this proportionally across the entire population and all factors that can be considered a risk of impairment to driving, whether it's your age, your sleep deprivation. Are we going to ban all mothers of newborns from the roads because they're sleep deprived? It's where do we go with this? It's especially when it comes to the punishment as well. The punishment for being under the influence of cannabis under this new legislation would be exactly the same as it is for alcohol. But that's, a 12-month ban and up to £10,000 fine. No, that's not proportionate. It's nowhere near as big a risk. I think risk is something I think which people struggle to understand when someone, the media says that, such and such doubles your risk. Well, yeah, but if your risk is 1 in a million, so that what makes it 2 in a million? It's not, we need a better kind of public appreciation of what risk is and how we deal with it.
With the correlation to other risk, that's a brilliant way. I wrote an article for, going back some time, I think it was I Smoke, way back in the day, arguing that if you don't smoke cigarettes, and you smoke a cigarette behind the wheel of a car, you are more impaired than you would be with smoking cannabis. Like that rush, the blood flow, the slight spinny feeling, distracted driving in terms of then one hand off the wheel eating. Yep. Like phones, Jesus Christ, phones. I mean, I'd even argue now, and I think the UK is slowly looking at this, or at least England and Wales are starting to go, we need to look at this. Reducing LED screens in cars and LED fucking lights on the road because they are so unbelievably dangerous, blinding, and I mean the AA and RAC and others have polled this, and huge numbers of people. Just to kind of fill in a bit of information for people for what we were saying a moment ago, juxtapose that 5%, that huge number of people that are consuming cannabis in Jersey, with the approximate 87% of adults in Jersey consume alcohol. 87. Average intake is 10 to 12 litres of pure alcohol a year.
Yeah. And we've a kind of common sort of nickname for Jersey is 100,000 alcoholics. It's not far off, to be fair. We've long had an established drinking problem. And it used to be a tourist destination. It used to be cheap booze and fags, but unfortunately they chucked up the taxes. But even with, we have minimum unit pricing, and they keep increasing the duty on alcohol, but the amount of people drinking stays the same because there's no corresponding education to go around to kind of minimise, health warnings.
There's no alternatives.
Yeah, and again, there's no alternatives.
It's interesting because you get a similar thing that you see across most alcohol consuming populations. The trends suggest overall the while consumption is high, younger people in teetotal is among 16 to 34-year-olds in the island has increased, with 23% of the group now reporting having never drinking. So
we're seeing that everywhere, though. The rise of the smartphone, everyone's addicted to their phones instead now. You're seeing a decline in alcohol, drug use, and even sex as well.
We slowly we can start to extrapolate backwards that alcohol is often been described as a social lubricant. So what do we mean by that? It helps squeeze and get us all into spaces where we're together. It facilitates connection. This thing lies and gives us a 4 version of connection. My screen is getting worse every week I hold this up. You can see how many scratches and breaks I have in it. I do drop it a lot. I'm hoping one day it just goes and I'm like, I'm free, until I realize I need the thing and it's going to cost me so many hundreds of quid to get it sorted. But yeah, exactly. It's a loss of connection. And a lot of people are discovering that in cannabis. That they'll find, you smoke as well as young people, then you sneak away and you're behind a bus shelter, you're in a corner of a field or whatever, and you have this community connection. You don't have the pub, you don't have the cafe, you can't just sit by the river and enjoy the sun and the birds and the nature, you know what I mean? You have to have this whole other thing that's part of it. And now these young people, they're growing up and they're seeing the just on there, even though it is across the other side of the world, that they're free, or not free, they have a freer system. They're able to do these sort of things. I can fly to Amsterdam, go to somewhere like Baba. I'm not plugging Baba, I just happen to be wearing a Baba shirt. Although I would plug Baba, they're a pretty damn good coffee shop. You can go over there and consume what you like, within reason, obviously, there's certain things, but even then, the discretion of the Dutch authorities, especially the Amsterdam police, for you as a tourist, I know that's lessening every year, but you know what I'm saying, versus how you'd get treated at home. So I think they're starting to get angrier and angrier at this absence of it. I mean, the chemical consumption amongst the youth has gone through the roof. They love themselves some ketamine. They love themselves some MDMA. Free parties are becoming the biggest entertainment for younger people in the UK again, for the first time in a generation, as obviously nightclubs are now set at the current rate of closure. There'll be no nightclubs left in the UK by 2029. Pubs are shutting at an enormous rate. And I've been advocating, and I think hopefully one day these alcohol consumers, I nearly said something derogatory and I didn't necessarily mean it, these alcohol consumers will realise that if their pub wants to exist and they want it for a Friday, Saturday, that's why we open the doors Monday to Friday and we smoke up. You've got the infrastructure, you've got kitchens, you've got pool tables, you've got dartboards, jukeboxes, booths. We can stick in some HVAC extraction equipment. You've got the car parking infrastructure to move people around. You've got takeaways and stuff nearby, proliferal economy that can be stimulated by cannabis economics. And the young people would then be able to go out and see each other and put our goddamn phones down and reconnect and bond, so that then when it's our time to be old and grumpy and the young'uns are coming up and wanting to try their new downloadable virus drug because they're all cyborgs, we're not just going to be like, oh, well, no, take real drugs. We want to be open to them, and, it's...
Yeah, for sure. I would love there to be, places that we could go and socialise and use cannabis, especially now with 5% of our adult population using medicinal cannabis. It's one of the things that, it's kind of medicinal cannabis is almost breaking a bit of cannabis culture in a way, in that, naive patients are getting cannabis for the first time, going home and using it alone, without understanding, without knowing exactly what they're doing, or, they've been given, got a vaporizer, got their weed, now what? Got to figure it out all out for themselves. So whether it's, from the sort of black market side, you grow up with your peers and, you've got people who are looking out for you and who can sort of tell you, oh, no, don't want to do too much of that, or, or you're starting to feel a bit rough, or, here's some orange juice, here's some sugar, counteract those feelings. So to actually have that peer support, I think that you get through socialisation would be far better.
It's the loss of regulation, because I was thinking there as well, like a lot of the free party crews I know and the sound crews I know, they run harm reduction on site. So they'll bring things like sanitary products, they'll bring things like naloxone, they'll bring all sorts of stuff, and with no prejudice towards what you want to do. Just don't be a dick is the general cultural rule. And we're now seeing that effectively, this might come back to bite me in the arse, but I would argue that you're better off taking substances that are currently criminalised in a free party setting than on the high street in a nightclub or whatever, in terms of the infrastructure they've set up there with the cameras set out to capture you. Did you just lift your hand close to your face from your pocket? Like, let me, grab and pull you out. Like, oh, you smell funny. You've been in the toilet too long. Like, looking under the store. Like, all of that. I don't go anywhere near that. I can't handle that. That makes me feel paranoid. That makes me feel like a horrible person for wanting to take a drug in the drug taking establishment because I'm taking the wrong drug.
Yeah.
It's mental. Like, again, another little thing is a bit funny. Back in the day when we used to visit Durham City, when there was a bit more night-like activity, one of the last occasions, one of the lads got pulled over by some bouncers. They searched his pockets. They found a bag of white powder. They thought it was cocaine. Like I said, the youth like ketamine. The bouncers went off and apparently decided to try and take this cocaine. Destroyed both their lives. About 2 weeks later, they saw the lad and they beat the living shit out of him. Because it was his fault that they got fucked up. That they victimized him, stole his property. Whereas again, that peer-led culture, and like I said, it's still there for cannabis culture. And there's a weird sort of intersex, and it keeps sort of moving as this ever-living and ever-changing beast of patients within the culture. Because so many of the patients, the naive on new patients that are coming in, don't know the heritage and the history. They don't know why we fight. They don't know and understand on whose shoulders they stand, the bodies that are buried beneath them, and the ongoing war. They're literally like, oh, I saw an advert on telly, paid my money, got my paper. I can now go, oh, no, you're not allowed to have a go at me. I've got magic paper. And do things that can cause consequences towards the non-protected class. You know, I've seen it, a protest in Parliament where one of the patients in the early days, 2019, basically ran in and be like, I'm prescribed, amongst a bunch of people consuming. Immediately set that cop to be like, are you all prescribed? Putting like 10 people in possession in threat because they wanted to go, look at me, I'm safe.
Yeah.
And there's just all these contradictions and these issues that if we could all just, like I said, get in that space, we'll sit down, have a nice truth and reconciliation committee about drugs and all the rest, and we all sit down and go, what have you been saying for 20 years? Because when I've got in rooms with cops and we had meetings and whatever else, and you hear what they actually think stuff is, like cops have no idea about extracts, about waxes and shatters and consumption of anything like that. They have no idea what's going on with bongs, lungs, buckets, different devices, mechanical things like it's a glue sniffing device. I'm like, no, you idiot. You put a chillum in the top. You know that thing you find, the 10mm socket in every kid that you keep finding with a bit of hash? Yeah, what they do is they put that in there and this and, oh. So how many people, next to nobody abuses solvents. And those that do are not doing it in bushes in public. Yet you're going to perpetuate this narrative, and then all the old grannies are going, look, the glue sniffers, these dangerous. Like, no, these narratives need questioning. Like, I've been pitching that for a while. I think that's something that needs to happen. Again, with Jersey being a microcosm of it, as it were, do you think that when the growing population, the changing populations, and as we've discussed with the statistics, there could be a potential, because of its small population size, to do something like that, to get a committee together that is literally asking kind of those questions and is trying to ascertain what the truth is, to give accurate information, to set a new baseline from which to work, so that you don't have that cop going, well, actually, yeah, my kid's granddaughter's dog when I was 16 did it once and he jumped off a cliff, and that being the reason the whole police does what the police do, you know?
I think so. I was really encouraged. So, when we started this political term in 2022, we didn't have a substance use strategy. It expired at the end of 2019 without replacement or review. So that was a bit disconcerting because obviously if you want to do anything with regard to sort of liberalising approach to cannabis, you need a substance use strategy there in the first place as a kind of safety net. So that was actually sort of brought in mid-2023, summer of 2023, and it's really progressive. It includes objectives of looking towards decriminalisation and legalisation options and, looking at public health approaches and looking at reviewing our Misuse of Drugs Act entirely. Looking at things like the Icelandic prevention model, which has been really successful at providing young people with alternatives of sport and art and culture, so they're active and are not bored and therefore liable to use drugs. There's some great stuff in there. So unfortunately, it's a 10-year strategy and it hasn't really progressed anywhere in the first 2.5 years. But hopefully within the next 7.5, that can help sort of guide a way to a more progressive approach to drug use generally, not just cannabis, but across the board.
That's something I was going to ask you. It seems to be a common theme wherever we look around the world. Cannabis is so viscerally opposed because it is the cudgel's the wrong word. What am I looking for? Like a stopgap, like a plug in the wall of their propaganda. That if they lose weed, every conversation that will apply to cannabis, you can go, but yeah, but why not X, Y, Z? So do you think that is part of the reason we have such opposition? You guys face such opposition as well?
Well, it's certainly part of it because, we'd love to advocate for legalisation of all drugs, the ending of prohibition of all drugs. But that's a step too far for most people. When you start, mentioning like the Green Party have done, they've just exemplified that perfectly. They've come out and said they want to legalise all drugs, and Labour and the right-wing press have jumped all over them. They're kind of like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Whereas actually, that's what's advocated by Human Rights Council, the UN, and various other UN bodies and different organisations that specialise in this field. That should be the accepted approach. Hopefully things move that way, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's not looking. It's not immediate. It's not immediate anywhere, and it's weird. Like obviously, you said you guys are moving into elections. I think the fact that you have, I mean, how many candidates do you generally run in the seats? Is it a case of like you're going to swap one for another, or is every seat kind of a potential for somebody to could move into? I know obviously it's getting close to the election now, so obviously every candidate's selected, as it were. But are there not?
No, we won't get the full list of candidates until the 27th of April for the elections on the 7th of June. So we only have 6 weeks of actual official full campaigning. About 10 have already announced that they will be standing. But for the 49 seats, there will probably be about 100 candidates overall. So pretty much, there'll be some that won't be contested, and there'll be others. There will be several candidates for the same seat. Some seats, we actually have 3 different types of politician, which really complicates things. Because the island's divided into 12 parishes, so each parish has 1 elected member. Then there's going to be 9 members that have an island-wide mandate. And then the island is also split into 9 districts, which have kind of equal population kind of size and have their representatives as well, deputies. So in the constables, that they're always going to be the conservative types who are not going to change anything. The senators are potentially also like that. So it's within the deputies, which is there's 28 of those. It's those that are the ones that are kind of most likely to be progressive, shall we say. But we won't know until the candidates are kind of actually fully announced and out there, and then it'll be after the elections to see what, who gets elected and what government we get following that, who gets, the health minister role and things like that will be quite key. Because if the health minister is anti-cannabis moving forward in the next term, then that's going to be a blocker to any kind of future progress. But if they're on our side, then there's good opportunities there.
Is there potential that the election could go that bad that things like import-export could be stopped, so that the mainland supply through the clinics and domestic sort of production could be stopped? Could it be as bad as that, or is it a case of we just you are incorrectly moving forward? There isn't opposition to reverse it.
We've got an established cultivation industry now that is just getting to the point of developing revenue that can then be taxed. So that will be, a beneficial thing for government that they're not going to get rid of. We've got 2 GMP licensed cultivators with at least 1, if not 2, in the pipeline, close in the pipeline, and perhaps a couple of others as well. So they're not going to stop that, but everything gets exported from Jersey, and then anything that is grown here, like under the Primacan brand or some of the big nasty stuff's grown here, goes to the UK and then comes back here to be prescribed.
That's what's GMP.
Yeah. So we couldn't just be, self-sufficient, as it were, for the medicinal side yet. There will be a point where they do the GMP packaging over here, and then it could go straight to the pharmacy, but we're not there yet. But yeah, I can't see them, the genie's out of the bottle now. Speaking to a policy officer in government the other day, and he described it as it's an oil tanker that started turning. You can't stop it once it's started turning. So yeah, we're hopeful that things will improve, but I don't think things will go backwards.
Okay, that's good.
Maybe there may be constraints coming with regard to prescribing. So they are looking at bringing in restrictions on the prescribing of medicinal cannabis in the island. I think they want to kind of put in a hard limit of 60 grams a month, and like really put it into regulations that they have to check and consult patients' medical records and all that, which is kind of, just following the current NICE and MHRA and GMC guidance anyway. So they'll be doing a consultation of that in the next couple of months. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that.
Do you think, because this ties into, again, I found it difficult getting access to quite a lot of your domestic media because most of it's bloody paywalled, but I've got a few stories here. One of which is from earlier this month being February 2026. I'm not that far out of date, folks. It's going to be released the same year. Cannabis use was quoted as a contributory factor in 22% of admissions to the acute adult mental health ward last year, being 2025. So what's going on firstly with that, and are narratives like that related to kind of what you were previously speaking of?
Well, I think, essentially at the end of the day, that headline of it being 22% had a contributory factor on admission. That doesn't mean it was actually a causal factor for their admission. It's just that they either said they were a medicinal cannabis user or they used illicit cannabis. It's not, doesn't necessarily state that was the cause, of why they were a hospital admission. I think there was a quote in one of our hearings with the Director of Mental Health last summer. He summed it up quite well as that these are people who are struggling more as a consequence of their cannabis use, are the people they're seeing affected by cannabis in our mental health system. So it doesn't seem to be that, it's just random people suddenly developing psychosis and ending up in our mental health wards. It's people who are already having, pre-existing mental health conditions, which is, as we know, is, the leader towards, potential psychosis, especially in young people. So those numbers are kind of alarmist in themselves, but they don't really give you the full picture.
It's not, I mean, it's deliberately misrepresenting. If then we're saying there's nearly 5,000 users, there's 22% of the admissions for context here, folks, in 2025 was 233 admissions. And as I was just stating there, they've basically gone an intake. Have you used weed? Either prescribed or non-prescribed. And if it's prescribed, they've then gone, oh, that's a contributory factor because it was present. And again, that out of the total population, that is a nominal thing. Yeah. But that again, they've calculated it. Even the thing of admissions, the language on it is it's deliberately to be alarmist to the prohibitionist and frustrating to the reformist, as it were.
Yeah, part of the problem is that there's a severe lack of data really surrounding prescribed use. It wasn't until 2 years ago that they start to actually properly, or they did an audit to count prescribing numbers, and it's only last year they probably started doing that, on a regular basis, and it's only this year they're starting to actually properly record, whether cannabis is, a causal effect on mental health admissions. So it's data we should have been collecting for the last few years and have a baseline for, but unfortunately we've got to, play catch up.
Yeah. I don't know. There's every now and then when we're talking about this, when I'm talking about this with anybody, I just get that overwhelming sense of frustration of what are we doing?
It's exasperating, isn't it?
Going through all this little and you go, this one law you signed back here, you guys 78, us 71, wherever in whatever jurisdiction you're in. Can we just go fucking tear that up and write one that's based on today? Like the world as we know it today. That's all I feel that needs to happen. And they don't want, we'll add this amendment, we'll create a new law here and a new bit of legislation. And it creates, I said, loopholes that feel deliberately exploitable for certain individuals. If somebody at a private school, get caught with a little bit of cocaine versus then somebody on the inner estate in a bigger city, you know what I mean? The discrepancy in the approach, I think that's part of it. They want that. They want that ambiguity so that when they get in trouble, no, judge. My 10 grand an hour solicitor says this. Oh, you get away. The guy that couldn't even begin to think of providing their own legal representation is just going to get fucked over every time. And I just got a little bit overwhelmed there, just looking through the. I've got loads of screens up here with all just the stats of it, and it's like, why we're using math to beguile and confuse? Even that headline, all of it is just, it's a narrative, manufacture and control, and you can understand why the average individual doesn't have a clue what to make of this.
Yeah, and especially some of our local reporting. It can lead to clickbait headlines and kind of misrepresenting what people say in this area as well. Like, I've been misquoted and things before that have changed my meaning.
I've had that a few times. Jesus, yep, they love that one. Speaking of then, controversial headlines, I can't see this because it's beyond a paywall and I can't find any other access to it. We spoke about this in the preamble. It's a Jersey Evening Post article from 21st of January with the headline, "Child almost freed for adoption over lawful cannabis use." What is going on there?
Yeah, so this was an interesting one. So essentially, a couple over here, they had mental health concerns and were prescribed a variety of drugs, including medicinal cannabis. They had a baby. There was concerns about the child. So our children's services were working with them, and they were looking to place the parents and baby in a UK parental assessment centre to kind of get a better idea of their parenting capability or whatever. And what the problem actually was the UK. So our Children's Services Department mentioned that the parents were medicinal cannabis patients, and they went over there and obviously started using their medicinal cannabis patient in the facility, and they were asked to leave, which of course would be against the UK's Equality Act, because they should be providing accommodations for those patients to use medicinal cannabis. So they were asked to leave. They came back to Jersey. And then the case kind of stalled for 6 months and didn't go anywhere. And then there was this case where the child minister was looking to put the child up for adoption because the UK Parental Assessment Centre had refused them, and they couldn't find another parental assessment centre to send them to. So it seemed, it appeared that the children's minister was just giving up on the case. I wrote, I found the legal judgment and went through it and kind of highlighted these concerns about how the assessment centre was breaking UK law, and that should be taken into account in trying to find a new assessment centre. And I posted that email. I shared it with our private group on Facebook. And then 2 weeks after the article you mentioned on the 21st of January, the JEP, I woke up and found my name and that email on the front page of the JEP, where one of their journalists, who wasn't a member of our group, had got the email presumably off one of their colleagues and then published it on the front page of the paper. So then I had to write to the children's minister and kind of go, look, this wasn't me. They've kind of grabbed it from our private group. Okay, if fair enough in a public group, that should be open to journalists, but to not even ask and nick something from a private group was just unseemly, to say the least. It's one of those. I kind of made my comment about it. As far as I know, they're looking for a new parental assessment centre for these parents, and hopefully it will all be good in the long run. But that headline was just absolutely horrific. The way it described the situation, and was alarming for a lot of patients, because it did imply that your child could be taken off you for using medicinal cannabis.
So I just got interested there because some of the language and the rhetoric reminded me of Reach PLC Media, who are a massive company in the UK who own absolute shitloads, all the live places and all of that, a load of radio stations, etc. So just Googling there, and the Jersey Evening Post is owned by All Island Media, which is effectively merged with the Bailiwick, got it right again, Express, and it's chaired by the former Jersey Chief Minister. Yeah. That feels like a conflict of interest, to have a former minister be in charge of effectively the major press of the island on such a small population.
Well, actually, he was I think just before he became chief minister, and when he was a sitting member of our parliament, he was in charge of the Jersey Post at that time. And the JP got sold in 2004 to a UK newspaper company. And it's only in the last couple of years that All Island Media was set up, and they bought the paper back to island ownership, and ended up being the former chief minister being the chair again. And it's certainly, the newspaper has certainly changed. There's been a different editor in the last year or so, and it certainly has changed. It's, different paper than it was.
Interesting. Now just falling down a rabbit hole about this Cleverly group. I need to stop doing research when I'm supposed to be talking about it, I guess. Sorry. It's because it feels like there are these monoliths that have a very, like I said, this cognitive dissonance, these biases they can't see, because so a complaint is made to the child services that two parents are maybe consuming a little bit too much alcohol. How would that process have gone versus cannabis? If those parents were prescribed opioids for various ailments, how would that process then have gone? The first assumption by the professionals when they've seen this is going, wait, are you following practitioner's guidance? Let's go then. Do you know what I mean? It would be.
In this case, it wasn't the fact that the patients were using medicinal cannabis. That wasn't a concern of our children's services over here, or all the other medications they were on. They were on a cocktail of medications. It was the decision of this parental assessment centre in the UK saying
was based off the right.
And that was the root of the whole breakdown of the entire thing. So in the judgment relating to this case, the judge said, no, child services, you need to look for another assessment centre in the UK, to which I then emailed to kind of...
Right, I get it.
They'd be breaking the law not to accommodate these parents' medicinal cannabis use.
No, right, I understand. No, I couldn't get the causal thing. Like I said, it's locked out. I couldn't, and I've tried to look at other things, and that of all the stories, there's quite a few Jersey evening press articles I can access for free, but for some reason that one is always locked behind a paywall. It's just got enough to make you like, what the hell have they done? If
you know in the settings of your browser how to disable JavaScript, you can get around their paywalls.
I didn't know I could just use Java. I've used the Java loophole with a few things before, but all right, if I know I can do that. I've literally put Java will liberate it as a note under.
Java's different.
Oh, JavaScript, script.
Simply developer settings.
Right, I know how to do that. Well, rather, I did at some point in my history, but I can ask my technical professional to teach me. Right, I'm looking at what other things I want to chat to you about. We've covered that. Fell down a rabbit hole with that. I suppose then let's talk about what was in the proposal, because obviously then if the election goes well and not much sort of changes, I imagine they'll get back to that. Maybe will it go back to the same point, or do you have to restart with a new government?
So probably just winding up for your viewers that, we had a proposition that was published just before Christmas that was a consequence of a decision made the year before, which asked the government, the Assembly asked the government to come back with proposals for how to regulate personal cannabis use. So there was a proposition published by the government in December that was entitled The Future Approach to Personal Cannabis Use in Jersey. And that presented three options for how to proceed, and states members could vote for one or more of the options. So they could be built up. You could vote for none of them, in which case nothing would change, or you could vote for one, two, or three of them. The first part of that was to ask the Attorney General to come out with guidance, essentially, that would allow police discretion to allow the decriminalisation of small amounts of possession, home cultivation, and social supply. Which, awesome, that kind of covers all we need. It also had a huge amount of harm reduction information to go with it, because they struggle to put out harm reduction information at the moment because it's an illegal drug and they can't be seen to be kind of encouraging use. So they don't say anything, which is a pain in the ass. So that was all good. The second part was to actually put it into law to legalise a small amount of possession and home cultivation. So that kind of just reinforces the first part. kind of doesn't add much in itself, but other than a bit more kind of general harm reduction information. But yeah, those first two go hand in hand. And then the third option was to develop a trial in regulated sales of cannabis for islanders locally. Be like a 5-year trial or something, very much like what's been undertaken in Switzerland and the different cantons there, which has kind of proven to be, a viable method of getting around the UN conventions, because it is a scientific trial in sales, which is a bit of a grey area, but it seems to have worked for Switzerland. Ideally, we'd like all states members to have supported all three options, but just the first option itself would be absolutely superb. And there is also cannabis social clubs would be considered under all options as well, as a kind of addendum. Unfortunately, that proposition was pulled mid-January because they'd had some concerns, I think, about the wording of that first option of asking the Attorney General to do something, because I think that's a bit of a no-no politically, in that, got a separation of the kind of the law officers and the judiciary from the politicians and everything. So I think that might have overstepped a line. So they're looking at rewording that, and they are looking at bringing it back. But it will be, and they are due to bring it back, because this is following a request of the Assembly from last June for the government to bring back proposals. So they still need to bring proposals to our Parliament for discussion. So that is still there. But it is fundamentally will be up to the new health minister coming in June, or who will be nominated in July. It will be up to them whether to proceed or not, or whether they just put it on the back burner and don't bother. So we'll be campaigning during the course in the run-up to the elections to try and encourage candidates to support cannabis reform and to ensure that proposition does come back. Otherwise, we could raise a petition or something to try and force it back. But we do need, if the health minister's not on side, we're going to find it difficult. But so fingers crossed we get a progressive health minister.
Yeah.
Also, at the same time, it's interesting to note. So over in Guernsey, in mid-January, one of their states members there, essentially their Home Affairs Minister, the president of their Home Affairs Committee, brought a requête, which is a proposition which had the signatures of 6 other Guernsey politicians to essentially do what we were doing in Class C, to look at bringing in trials in regulated sales. So that proposition is due for debate next month, and they are to report back by the end of 2027 with proposals on how to move forward. So it's quite interesting that both islands are looking in the same direction. So there is potential there, and if we can work together on this, so if we can encourage our new government to work with the Guernsey politicians, because I'm already in touch with the states members in Guernsey as well, to help encourage them and help inform them, because part of the problem they will encounter is that they don't actually have a cultivation industry. There were licenses and there were companies cultivating a while ago, but Guernsey's always been a bit reluctant when it comes to the exports of cannabis. So for Guernsey to have a supply to support their own regulated market, they would need that supply to come from Jersey, really, because they don't have the capacity to do that at the moment. Otherwise, the development of that capacity would take a couple of years on top of, the legislation coming through. And then I think if Jersey and Guernsey were to work together and have the same approach, that gives a far stronger voice to the Home Office, who is going to be our main blocker in actually allowing us to do this. Because obviously the UK government doesn't want to move on this. When you look at what happens in the British Overseas Territories, so you've got the British Virgin Islands and Bermuda have both tried to bring in legislation to legalise recreational cannabis, adult use cannabis, and that's been denied by their governor under instruction from the UK Foreign Office, because the British Overseas Territories do have kind of representation in Parliament, and they do come under the auspices of the UK, whereas the Crown dependencies of Jersey, Guernsey and Isle of Man, the King is our head of state, but we have no Parliament who have no parliamentary representation, and the UK government does not represent us in any way, apart from on that international stage when it comes to UN conventions. So it comes down to ensuring that any kind of approaches that we do take are compatible with the UN conventions in a way that the UK can allow us to proceed. But other than that, that's the only potential blocker. I can't see the King kind of refusing royal assent. It would be the Home Office kind of just going, no, we're not going to permit you to do that. And we do need to be on side with the Home Office, unfortunately.
So by the nature of the relationship between sort of the Crown dependent states and the UK, you don't have, I suppose, what we could term the Canadian option, just withdraw from the convention and then re-sign.
No, because Canada's obviously their own signature to the UN convention, so they can do what they want. We have what's called the Bevan Declaration, which is from 1950 or 51, which specified that any convention that the UK signs does not automatically apply to the Crown dependencies. Those conventions have to be extended to us, and we have to accept them. So we have done that, unfortunately, with all three drug conventions. So we do have to abide by them, and we come under the UK's kind of authority there, and who are kind of reluctant. But looking at the UN ODC, they've got meetings coming up next month in March. That is starting to move and become a little bit more progressive in the last couple of years. The Colombian delegation last year kind of pushing for a review of the UN drug treaties and everything. So ducks are starting to get into a line, just very, very slowly and uncoordinatedly. But
So is there then, do you think, scope, and you may very well be having these conversations, that there may be an organisation or entity that I'm not aware of a unified movement between yourselves, the Isle of Man and Guernsey, because what is good for one is good for the other. If you've all got the same sort of proto-law, where one gets through, the same thing can pass. And obviously that's all derived from then sort of UK law. And if you guys are suddenly putting a lot more pressure as collectively as you are, and you can flip that script, because then if you guys can bring in homegrown cultivation that then is supplying the UK, so you're exporting, not to import it back, but to supply the UK will very quickly be like, aren't we supposed to be getting that money? Do you know what I mean? It's showing them a loss. We can show them a potential win, but it's only until they sort of lose something that they really start to go, wait a minute.
Well, I mean, we can offer, perfect test beds for, a Labour government that doesn't want to touch cannabis with a barge pole. They can say, oh, but we're allowing Jersey and Guernsey to run these trials as a test bed to see how it works there for potential implementation across the UK in future. So it kind of gives them a bit of breathing space. They can kind of knock it a little bit into the long grass, but still doing something. I do work with my counterparts in Guernsey as well. We've got the Channel Island Cannabis Collective running between the islands. So I have been, had a meeting with them and the Guernsey deputies earlier in the month. But Isle of Man is quite separate, but they are doing their own thing as well. So they had a decision in their parliament in November 2024 for policy principles for when it comes to dealing with drugs, which was due for publication in December, but hasn't actually come out yet. But essentially, that's going to decriminalise possession of all drugs, as far as I understand it. So that's quite an interesting step. I'm still waiting for it to come through and actually see the final wording of what. But that was the implication of when it was running through Tynwald. So they're doing their own thing in a way. They're a little bit further behind in cultivation, but there are obviously opportunities to work with the Isle of Man. We're all very similar. We're all offshore financial centres in our own right. There is the British Irish Council, which does bring all the different parties together of the Crown dependencies, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Northern Ireland, brings everyone together. So there's a forum there for kind of pushing things as well. So we'll have to kind of wait and see, but very much focused on working with Guernsey for the moment.
Interesting. So I've had a few different guests on, sort of recently, Welsh, Scottish, etc. We've ended up talking about independence. It's my belief, that within my lifetime, we're going to see a reunified Ireland, we're going to see an independent Scotland, and potentially an independent Wales, purely off the fact that once the other two start to go, I know Wales has got a big movement now with Plaid looking to take the next election, etc. And there is a big resurgence in sort of national culture, history, language, education, etc. And that is moving sort of forward. I'm just wondering if there's then you can almost extend that to the no English club. And I say this is somebody stuck in little old England, but it's Westminster, it's Parliament, it's London, it's that's holding us all back. And that's where the decisions are made until it's profitable, until it's controllable, until it's beneficial enough to that entity. The rest of us will stuff it. Yeah. So yeah, because again, there's movements in Scotland. Scotland are quietly becoming a powerhouse. Do you know what I mean? With domestic cultivation, 3, maybe 4 sites coming on board. Their low THC cultivation, so-called hemp cultivation, has been moving thanks to. Oh, his name's just jumped out my brain. I can see it. Kyle Esplin and people like that. And so you're starting to see consolidation and movements there. I think the next step in a lot of ways is basically you all just meet around us, and then you just go to Little England and you go, look, we're gonna this is what the situation is, because they're limited by the same sort of issues. They're hampered by being independent enough, but not independent enough to truly get the fuck off us. But I think that collective power in terms of bargaining, could really be something.
Well, yeah, and there's obviously a reluctance of the British UK government to look to other territories and see how they're doing. So actually, if you could have some data and things developing within the British Isles as a whole, they're more likely to look at that as kind of evidence to build decent policy.
It's a shame we couldn't just study the expat population in Spain that are all out there smoking weed. Like, do you know what I mean? The pockets of it. It's ridiculous. Like England or the UK looks around the world, it's like la 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 until it sees Prohibition Max, and then it's like love hearts and fucking lovey music. You know what I mean? It's that's what.
Look back to the Indian Hemp Commission.
Well, yeah, literally. These are commodities, and the people that consume them are idiots, and we can control them by controlling the commodity. And then that's led out to social control, to the international slave trade and globalization and everything else that we're kind of living under. And I think a big thing is patient voices, I think, are going to be huge, because as enough legacy people move into the patient spaces and are then going, wait, this isn't fucking right, and explain to the new people who are going, this is all right, why it's not and what it is. Yes, you're getting some benefit, but your security shouldn't be predicated on the suffering of others. And it can be, but my illness, my da-da-da. Well, yeah, you can make other choices, but the choices you're making is to do this with the least hassle on yourself. Whereas if we were to pool our resources, like I said, there's many, many hands make light work. And I know we've been talking about this for decades, and it's difficult, but it's mass movements that do something when the voice gets loud enough. And I think that's the pressure that we've had, whether it be, I've already forgotten her last name, Evelyn's story in Jersey, or it be people like Vera in Ireland, or Charlotte and others, Hannah Deacon, etc. That have kind of pushed and helped those things. But it was the optics that worked well for the media. But it's the office worker stoner, it's the taxi driver stoner, it's the guy HG long distance. Those are the ones we need as much as the patients. But we need that unity so that people can look and go, oh, that guy with no legs. And then the guy stood next to him that, air quotes, looks normal. They don't see the difference. They can't, there isn't. And that we can deal with this hypocrisy, because what's good for the casual consumer is good for the patient. But what's good for the patient isn't necessarily what's good for the casual consumer, and it isn't good for the patient in the long run. We're seeing exploitative, predatory practices within this already. The sheer number of clinics and prescribers in the UK that have gone off, and what they're basically chasing, the way that they're, I'm going to put some allegedlys in here just to cover my own ass. I'm not going to name any names, but effectively skirting the laws on advertising by paying for influencers, by funding certain things, by allowing certain things to happen, and controlling certain narratives, and having preferable access to the right-wing press, being all of the mainstream press in the UK at this point. And so anything that becomes out, they manage to make a story that's the wreckheads, bad people. But this is why the med ones are good, so come join us. And every negative, so they've now combined the advertising of the clinics with the propaganda of, and not our weed equals bad. and it's getting so like tear your eyes out because someone like you or I can just see it. All you can see is that. But again, the average sort of granny that's going through this, maybe suffering with arthritis, that maybe now is going to develop such a degenerative disease from the steroid treatment that she's been on for 10 years, and it'll kill her, like it did my gran. That if she'd have just fucking, if I could have just got her on some just once, just a little. But even her, she worked in palliative care for 40 odd years. She remember giving like cannabis oil, like honey oil, in the 70s, back in the day to a patient because that was the only thing they could deal with this kid as he was dying. Like she had that connection to it, but even in her own suffering and pain, what would the neighbours think? What would you, do you know what I mean? And it's that is what hurts me, is I don't want it to just be the people that almost as an act of rebellion want to be like, yeah, I've got my script. Mm. Like, no, we can all benefit from this, but we have to get over this artificial division, whether it be that hemp, medical, rec is the appropriate, not appropriate, but the current terms that we use to divide this. And I think there's people that... Sorry, go on.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I kind of do get worried that are we heading down a path which it only becomes medicine? And that worries me hugely because for me, it's a plant with medicinal benefits. That's just one part of it. It's not, there's a lot more to cannabis besides that we shouldn't be throwing away. And we shouldn't be stigmatizing people for, what is a victimless crime. Cannabis,
It's the thing of like, drinking opium tea, smoking opium, or like we developed for a while a sort of a taste of opioid infused hash. Do you know what I mean? There was that history of its consumption, and then through the creation of like the hypodermic needle, the standardization of opioid based medications, these derivable, patented, extractable, mass manufacturable compounds. They then went, well, we're the ones that control it. Them lot over there, they were lucky in America. They go, oh, look at the Chinese expats. They're bringing it over here. The same shit we hear when we've heard for decades about cannabis and other drugs. And they demonize that cultural consumption while at the same time hyper-normalizing the guy in the white coat. This is a clean, safe product. Look at what's happened with Oxycodone and Purdue Pharma and all of that shit, man. They made like $16 billion from destroying the lives of millions of Americans while telling them this product is less addictive than if you were to just go and take diamorphine heroin, which is just fundamentally not true. Yeah, that's what they positioned it as. We're good, we're safe, you buy. And we're your dealer. And then they cut the dealer off. And then you wonder why they're going to the street. Like, it's the hypocrisy of all of this shit has just come to a point where it can be a medicine. It can be a food source. It can be an insulation product, but it is a plant. Yeah. And yeah, I challenge people all the time going, cannabis is medicine. It's like, please understand what your sentence is. If you're saying cannabis is medicine, you're also saying it can't be anything else. Would you use heroin to build a house? I mean, if you're a cartel member or whatever, maybe you would. Like, but maybe you could strip. Actually, it's not got the same cellulose or fibrous material. It's not the same plant at all. But like, so cannabis, because of its multifaceted use, it can be different things. But yeah, as you see, you wouldn't then arrest the guy who's living in the cannabis house for being in possession of cannabis because there's no of the active compounds. But this is where the law just falls apart in that, in this environment, we will fuck you because of this rule. In that environment, we'll get you because it's in your blood. This one will, you smelt, so I can search your pockets. Now I've got your car keys. Oh, I've got your car. I'm getting your house now. Oh, you got to grow, have you? Why? Because you smelt me. There's nothing else in the world we do that for. You've spoken up before, like the prohibition of the combustion of cannabis. In the UK, as we discussed the other week with the 4-way special, it's the only method of drug consumption that's criminalised. Yet the entire history of its medicinal consumption is predicated on its combustion. It's just...
And it's not illegal to smoke non-medicinal cannabis. That's always the...
Yeah, just to possess it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the only restriction on the use of cannabis in the law.
But there's an interesting thing there of that a decent solicitor or actually somebody litigating person in a UK law, UK court, I believe would be able to juxtapose that to a judge of going, look, I am lawfully allowed to possess this product. So when the weed's in there, I'm possessing it, boom, put that there. I take a little bit out, put it there. That's still over there as Schedule 2. I've then rolled this into a joint, still Schedule 2. Schedule 2, Schedule 2, Schedule 1, right? So you're saying that's prohibited. That's still sat over there as Schedule 2, so you can't get me for the possession of that. So is it then the possession of this? And then if I've then burnt it and there's no active compounds, you can't then measure that to get, like, It falls apart very quick because there isn't, and it literally says the smoking of cannabis is prohibited. That is that's it. It doesn't relate to a law or whatever. Some people have inferred that obviously this means it reverts back to scheduling, but life is linear, and so that product is still sat there as Schedule 2. The cop can't make that determination. You smoked that bit of it. The rest of it is still fine. If you left that at home and he didn't see it, but you had that, it's frustrating. Like I said, because as somebody, I've got Dr. Riley Kirk's coming back on to talk about unique pharmacology for compounds found in combustion, because I can't vape cannabis. I've got a Volcano, I've got a Pax. Believe me, the companies get in contact with me, give me products. It doesn't help me. It gives me a headache. Yeah, I can roll a blunt, and within even the process of rolling it, I'm getting benefit. And then I spark it, and within, and it's done. It's done. I've got my shit thing. I can then move on. I can choose to then have a couple more or whatever, or as you've seen, I'll then put it down. Move on with the conversation, whatever. I'll feel my focus going, or I'll feel myself getting jittery or whatever because of my ADHD or autism. And I'll go, oh, I'll have a couple more of that and ground myself again. That's under the practitioner's guidance, self-regulated when you need it. The only issue is, oh, he's combusting it. But if I was to vape it, it wouldn't benefit me. So I would then only be able to consume so-called black market, unlawful, unregulated cannabis. And then you'd criminalize me for that. Through no fault of my own. You've set an arbitrary restriction that limits my capability for wellness on a medical product out of ignorance. So it's, as I keep saying to patients, because we've had quite a few people commenting and having conversations post that episode, you're not safe from the police per se. You're safe from the judiciary. When you get into a court of law, even as what happened to Sal, they may prosecute you, but you goddamn appeal that shit. In PIP assessments in the UK, it's something like 80-20 right now. So I think they're refusing 80% of the applicants up front, but then 80% of the appeals are going through. So it's the same sort of thing of like, yeah, you may get caught up and they'll take you, whatever. Learn the procedures as we've discussed. You can't surrender, you can't refuse the swab because it's tied with cocaine. This is maybe something you guys could look at with your legislation, is separating out the test product. Because if you refuse to take the swab as a prescribed patient in the UK, you can get done for failure to provide because you could be trying to hide your cocaine consumption. Whereas if it was a separate device, you wouldn't then have to submit to that device because you would already have a reason to. It would nullify the point of doing it. So it's just. So I've got wound up again with it all, but it's just there are these massive glaring issues that. Again, as we've discussed many times through this podcast, I'm not lessening you guys as a territory by saying like as a microcosm, you know what I mean? But you do that would work so well for these pilot schemes that I can't understand why there isn't a point of acceleration, why the Home Office and other entities are not actively trying to support this, because if they believe that it'll fail, why not let it, no offense to you, let it fail on you lot over there, and then they go, look, we've got the hard data, this is why we can't do it here to our people, because they don't believe it'll fail.
Well, yeah, I think that's the core of it, isn't it? Is that they know they'll lose.
100%, man, 100%. There's a couple of points here, and we'll sort of go to wrap up. So we discussed this in the preamble. I thought I would have brought it up as we were talking anyway, but yeah, so you guys eventually came on after us. We went 71. We pulled up after the 66 convention. 78, you guys came on board. How, at some point, did cannabis oil in that process end up as a Class A Schedule 1 under your legislation?
The same way as it did in the UK. Before 2003 in the UK, cannabis oil was a Class A and cannabis flower and resin were Class B. So cannabis oil is kind of just a colloquial name for extracts and concentrates, really. There isn't a specific cannabis oil because you've got THC, CBDs, whatever. But in 2003, the UK government brought all cannabis down to Class C, and then 2008 bumps them back up to all cannabis to Class B. So your cannabis oil went A, C, B.
I should really know that.
I think
Tell me something.
was it you that wrote the I Smoke article on.
Oh, Jesus Christ. See, yeah, I've already forgotten this. Yeah, that's exactly. I've been in this so long, I've written that much shit that, yeah, I probably have forgotten this, but that is a good point to raise up.
The thing was, Jersey never did any of that. We never brought it down to a Class C, or cannabis down to Class C, and then obviously never brought it back to Class B. So cannabis oil has sat there as a Class A drug since 1978. I think looking back through our laws, extracts and tinctures of cannabis were always treated as a medicinal product. So cannabis and cannabis resin came immediately under our dangerous drugs laws in the 60s. But the cannabis oil or tinctures and extracts came in under a different law of kind of abusing a prescribed drug. I forget the actual name of the law. So they had that separation, and extracts and tinctures could still be prescribed in Jersey up until 1980. So even just slightly after the law came in. But I think because it was in that medical bracket, it kind of got stuck with that Class A status in the 78 law. And then we have had kind of relaxation of the approach to cannabis in subsequent years. So in 1998, so we probably step back a bit, we got a different kind of policing system to the UK in that it's not the police who charge you, it's you go to what's called a parish hall inquiry, and the prosecuting officer, the prosecuting officer there is the one who charges you. And in 1998, the Attorney General issued guidance to allow the possession of small amounts of Class B and C drugs. So you're allowed up to 7 grams of cannabis and cannabis resin for a first offence. You get a written caution. That was 98. 2015, they upped that to 15 grams and also included some Class A drugs. So this also applies to 2 grams of coke or 2 pills, as well as other drugs. 2019, they made that a second offence. 2024, they made it a £200 fine for third offence. So, moving towards proposals for how we further decriminalise possession or legalise possession. We've been on this pathway for 28 years now. It's about time we kind of did put it properly in legislation rather than it just being guidance from the Attorney General.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the overview of this. That's mental. It's like when I found out about the sheriff system in Scotland, and I was like, wait, what? Yeah, interesting.
For a quirky little ones.
Yeah, so because you've kind of answered what was going to be my question that came off the back of that, was because the reason that the UK kind of moved to where it did was 97. California went, MMJ, medical marijuana, also called medical marijuana, and a lot of people around the world went, what the hell's that about? What's going on? And we had a Royal Commission, and that went off, made some recommendations that were highly ignored. GW Pharmaceuticals was created in the background, and there's a whole...
You know what they were called before GW?
No.
Guernsey Pharmaceuticals. They started in Guernsey in 98. They tried to set it up in Guernsey, but because it's different law and Home Office and everything, they had to move to the UK.
No way. I always wondered what the... Interesting. That gives me a whole load of avenue to go down, because that's a completely different government that we can use legislation to get information from. Interesting. And so that all that background stuff happened, the Portadown alleged grows and whatnot, and 2001 amendment, the misuse of drugs regulations 2001 are set in place effectively just to go, I know Schedule 1 says it's got no medical value, but we're going to sell some Schedule 1 drugs and kind of get around that. And then obviously, like you said, there's the whole Brown and everything debacle with Jackie Smith, and I think that was more pressure, and then it kind of came to a thing of going, yeah, but wait a minute, we're thinking more of creating pharmaceutical drugs, and they're kind of, we thought you meant cannabis. Sorry, dude. Yeah, cannabis bad, cannabinoids good, and it started that kind of movement. And I think that's just as you were saying before, of the fear of kind of it all becoming medical. My fear is it all becoming cannabinoid. I mean, me and Ed Rosenthal, bless him, we got in a proper back and forth on the podcast about the future of cannabinoid production, because he was talking about yeast, modified yeast brewing, and I'm like, but is that cannabis? Like, if that's where you go and the industry goes, and all of a sudden some company can set up in the middle of an Arizona desert and just brew thousands of litres of cannabinoids, why would we then have more progressive laws for access? How would that help me be able to grow and smoke my own weed at home? not to be too selfish in it, but you know what I mean? It's not going to expand freedom. It's just going to narrow it down. And the movements by the big boys towards that.
I can see the medicinal side, as we get better understanding, that you will get more personalized formulations for your condition that are certain cannabinoids and certain terpenes that are hopefully originating from the plant, and that we will probably move away from flower. This is talking probably decades in the future, because there's a lot of research to work out what the compounds are in the first place, let alone how they all interact with each other in different portions, all the rest of it. I can see that kind of going that way. But as far as the rest of adult use goes, then we need the flower, and we need those growers to bring out the best of the plant, because what we're seeing in the medicinal market is just high THC stuff, which I think is lacking a lot of the cannabinoids and terpene profiles that you'd get from an outdoor variety, for instance.
It's lacking like the depth of the experience, like short-term high, maybe a lot of flavor, but not. It's not got the longevity. Like, I remember as a youth, you'd pick something up and, this is an introspection one. I'm going to sit here and think about shit. I'm another one going, I need to get up and move. I'm going to go climb that tree. I'm going to go look at that bush. I'm going to go, like, there was very definable effects, whereas a lot of the modern inbred cultivars coming through the genetic avenues, genetic cul-de-sacs are getting stuck in them, like sort of the cookies, offshoots, etc.
One of my favourite varieties I came across in Amsterdam was one called warm ears. Just sent the blood to your ears and gave you warm ears.
But again, like I said, we've mapped the human genome. We understand, or at least we have a blueprint, even if we don't fully understand it. We have technologies like CRISPR and all of this other shit. Yeah. People can fall down a rabbit hole by looking at Israel in terms of the amount of investment that is going on there and research, and there are companies that are doing exactly this, that are basically trying to map deficits. So they're effectively looking at it as I've argued for a long time, cannabinoids are more akin to vitamins than they are to anything else. Because of our endogenous production of them, we have and live in environments that reduce them, that damage the receptors. We consume things in our diet. There's pollution, microplastic, So our exogenous consumption of that is to top it up. So you can either if you've got scurvy, you eat your oranges, you take your pure vitamins. We didn't have the vitamins, so we ate the oranges. And I think that's where we're at with it. At the minute, we're all consuming cannabis, the flower, because of the absence. So I want to see a world where we kind of move towards fortifications of grains and foods, because if you have the acidic forms of these cannabinoids in small amounts within the food, then you're going to get the majority of the benefits and none of the psychoactivity and none of the worry of, the kids are getting high. I mean, if you had cannabis on your Weetabix, it would be a lot less harmful to you than the bowl of sugar puffs next to it.
Yeah, there seems to be a lack of research and kind of push for actual, for the THCA, the CBDA, those acidic forms, which do have huge potential, going by some of the Israeli research.
Mm-hmm. It's the things to start to find now in the leaf compounds and things like this, that people know that have been growers. There are some plants you'll grow that just from day one just have a stink. There ain't no trichomes. There isn't none of the traditional points of floral expulsion that we understand in cannabis, yet I can smell that 3 rooms over and it's a week into veg. Yet there's another things that have nothing into it, and then 3 weeks after curing, suddenly you can't keep it in the house. We just don't understand. It's this idea of like freshness. Like, I am always and always have been an advocate for consuming fresh cannabis. Basically, as soon as it is dry enough to break off itself, you should be consuming that, and that shelf life should be short. You shouldn't go more than a few months, and keep it in pressurized glass, keep it out of the dark, so for UV destruction, etc. And there'll be you can feel it but the cultivars have a different window. Some of those things, like I said, you'd put in a jar and go, I'm not going to touch that for a month because I'm just going to waste it. I'm not going to get the feeling and the joy from it. Whereas there's other things. No, but I'm saying of different cultivars. There's some that I'll pull down, allegedly may have in the past when I've cultivated or not, that I would pull down that they're just so alive that you just consume it and it's the best, and every day it dissipates. And it's just such a variety out there that we don't understand, and we're all going, no, his standard, the AI industry, the AI inputs have now said, I need 1,000 by 1,000, these lights by this, and they do all the math, all the grid, and pull in all the equipment, and then they stick in a cultivar that's like, yeah, dude, this isn't my environment. And they just don't have that connection to how to grow a plant and to how to get the best out of it.
But it's also, it's like quite partial to hash. That's used to be all that we used to get over here before the pandemic. Now there's hardly any black market imports, and a lot of our black market is essentially just diverted medicinal cannabis. But yeah, that old school hash, because by it being aged, you'd have it's got its own terpene, hashishene, which is just glycine over time degrades to that, and you also get more CBN, THC degrades to that. So there is benefit to.
You get lipids and wax and all sorts, dependent on the level of SIF, dependent on its composition. I mean, this is going to go back into the day. You would know a leb from a Moroccan. You'd know it from a mile away. You'd know a charas from a gold seal or whatever. And each of them you would know for yourself how that would react with you. Maybe your friends would have a different reaction because of their endocannabinoid system and even as subtle as things as there is a thing of set and setting in cannabis. It's not as severe and as necessary as LSD, for example, but there is definitely a set and setting with cannabis. It's that social moderation. We don't really have that. So alcohol, the pub used to be the thing. You'd go, oh, Mike, we're going out tonight. Yeah, we're going out, lad. You'd have 1 or 2 drinks at home because you can afford the drinks outside. You'd have 1 or 2 quick drinks. You go down the pub, maybe get a taxi down. So you're putting money in the economy. Grab a bit of food or something on the way in. You go, you drink, boy, you'd have got a bit too far. The barman's like, Dave, you've had a bit much. He looks over at your mate go, oh, fucking mate, hour. Then you go to a taxi rank. The whole infrastructure there to get you safely into that. On the way, oh mate, can we just? I know, right next street. I just want a pizza, dude. I promise. It is an extra 10. Like, oh man, hour. And he gets his pizza and he goes home and he wakes up in the morning with a hangover. Like, we need that moderation system in place for cannabis and other drugs. That it's not to say you shouldn't, but it's for someone that cares about you, someone that is licensed as well from the institute side, to then look at this and go, we should probably help there. Like the early 90s explosion of ecstasy being consumed in mainstream spaces, the institutions went, all right, you dickheads, you don't drink alcohol anymore. I'm going to charge you 20 quid to get in the door, and then I'll give away free water. Because I know what you're doing. And then after a while, they started to control the ecstasy supply, etc. And it worked pretty well for a while. And then Thatcher and that came in and tried to fucking destroy it. So we went, let's go to the fields. And then they came after them with the Free Party Act and all of that lot. And what did they do? They compounded the dangers of the drug, of the culture, they demonized the people, they disenfranchised them. And all they were trying to do was connect with each other in the same way you're quite happy for us to do down the pub.
Well, it's the war on drugs. Just look at Mexico. You cut off one drug lord, and you have the Hydra pop up with more violent offenders.
Recent events are mental. And again, this is why you've got Colombia, Bolivia, a lot of the South American nations are pressuring UN and other international bodies, being like, because I think it was Bolivia in 2023, somewhere around there, did a report of basically going like, how much do they make off the cocaine they're selling? How much are we spending to fight them? It's cheaper if we just buy the cocaine off them. Like this, the economics of this are like, what are we actually doing? We're fighting a war we know we cannot win. We're creating positions where people will become highly corruptible. I'm hoping to get Neil Woods back on the podcast shortly because me and him did a talk at Solfest where he talked about the effect of the global drug war on climate change and things like this and how corruption affects governments. So I wanted to jump too so much into that, but the effect that then has, and it creates this cyclical cycle where then they just reinforces it and go, no, we need all this money to attack and give us all the armaments in those trucks, and then all of a sudden the cartel are driving around in those trucks and you're like, wait, what? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that, because like I said, they're incapable, or it feels like the people in power are incapable of understanding the position that to us is our everyday life. To them it's so alien, so abstract, and I just don't know how, because I feel like we've been giving them the information, we've put in the proposals, we've done the demonstrations, we've done the march. How many people have died? How many people are suffering? How many people are going to die, get locked up, while they're now at this point going, oh, it's all bad. Except, Mike I went to uni with, he set up a business, right? And if we get him connected with the Home Office, and I'll get a CEO position when I retire. So Mike's good, the rest of you, bad people. And that's all. It's just this preferential cronyism and bullshit. And yeah, it's costing lives, money, the economy, the climate.
Yeah, the effects are horrendous. The war on drugs, the amount that's been spent on it. It's a model that hasn't worked. We need to try a different one as soon as possible.
Could not agree more. I think we've actually managed to cover every point that I want, and we've done it in about 2 hours. I think that's pretty good, I was a bit worried when I started recording. I don't feel so head fluffy now, but I think we've done all right there. So I suppose because there's recent events and things happening, I'd like to invite you back on at the end of the year or toward the end of the year, hopefully when you've got some good news and we can
Yeah, fingers crossed.
we can celebrate. In the meantime, where can people sort of follow your work, keep an eye on events in Jersey?
We've still got a private Facebook group. Can be a little bit difficult to find because Facebook can be a little pernickety when it comes to a search for cannabis. We've got a page as well, but we don't keep that updated, but that's got a link to the group. It can be a bit easier to find the page. We've also, I'm kind of active on Twitter, post on there semi-regularly. And then other than that, it's our website, which I'll shortly going to start working on our campaign for the elections next week. And then I'll be developing a web page about the elections over the course of March, which will kind of highlight the approach we're taking with asking our candidates to whether or not they support cannabis reform. And then we'll be kind of highlighting those candidates to the members of our groups and other islanders. So if I can put out one request for anyone in Jersey to please vote in the upcoming elections for candidates that support cannabis reform. And then fingers crossed we can get the result we all want.
Excellent. Perfect. I'll include some links below. And I will let you go. I'll do some housekeeping. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Si, for taking the time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. You've taught me quite a few things about Jersey, and you've got me quite interested now. So I'm going to be messaging you every now and being like, oh, what's happening? Because I can see it that if you guys get it right, because of the connection to the mainland, I don't want to say the mainland in a derogatory sense, but us lot, that can apply pressure, even if it's small. It gives us something we can work with on our side because it's very similar law. I've
always been kind of sort of reaching out to sort of UK organisation and activists over the last couple of years, and always found it quite difficult because we are a separate entity, and it doesn't really translate. But there is an opportunity for Jersey to kind of set a path forward for the whole of the British Isles.
No, I agree. All right, excellent. It's been a pleasure, brother. Take it easy. Peace and love. Well, there you go, folks. That was Si Harrison from the Bailiwick. That first I really matters a lot. Apparently, it's a pet peeve of people from Jersey if you pronounce it Bailiwick, which is what I was doing when I was doing all of my research this morning. So I'm glad I managed to get my pronunciations correct throughout that. That was very interesting. I don't know how I haven't had Si on the podcast before. We've interacted a few times over the years, kind of back and forth. But yeah, I've never really looked too deeply into kind of the Channel Islands beyond sort of superfluous research that I've done for various things. And naturally, I've just remembered the article he's on about from iSmoke, where I'm talking about the law change with the scheduling of cannabis oil in the UK. I'm blaming that on the cold and the fact that I haven't thought about that since I wrote it in probably 2017 at this point, 2016, 2017. So it was a good 10 years ago. I'll be allowed the discretion of forgetting that. But yeah, I hope you guys took something from that. Definitely going to be using Si as our kind of Channel Islands unofficial correspondent moving forward. The election's coming up, I think he said early June. So we'll get him on sort of back end of the summer to kind of see what's happening with the new legislative branch legislative. What am I trying to say here? Legislature, the assembly of elected officials of Jersey. And see if they've kind of looking positive, looking negative, neutral as to the new makeup of the representatives. I can't remember how you sort of broke it down. There's the 3 districts and of the senators and whatnot. So it's a little convoluted, but something I'm going to go and look into because I do like Proto-English law purely just to sort of learn, how to break it, if nothing else. I hope you guys took something from that as well. I'm not going to keep you much longer. I think we've just about kept this to 2 hours, so I'm doing all right here. Yeah, if you want to check out Si's work, I'll include links to various web pages, websites, and resources for Jersey below. yeah, if you enjoyed this, please do give us a like, a share, a subscribe, a heart, a thumbs up, whatever it is you do on your platform. Show appreciation. I appreciate it and I appreciate you. Check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life, where for less cup of coffee a week, you can help me keep the lights on this little project of mine. Check out thesimpalife.com for exclusive articles, blogs, etc. Yeah, on social media at The Simpa Life, and you just be beautiful to each other. We'll be back next week with, I don't know, somebody be awesome. You'll love it. I will as well. All right, take it easy. Peace and love, folks.